You're listening to the Coop Homeschool Podcast.
This is your podcast for community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling. I'm Mandy.
I'm Jessica.
And this is The Coop. Today, we are talking about learning through pets.
Excellent.
We both have pets. Mm-hmm. Our kids take care of pets. Mm-hmm. And we've seen so many wonderful benefits in their learning academically, emotionally, and we're going to talk about that.
Yes.
All right, but first, what's your scoop on the coop?
We have a tarantula. And we've had this tarantula now for a few months, but the continued learning is pretty amazing. And something interesting just happened with this tarantula.
Ooh.
He shed for the second time. And it's crazy to me how they pop off that old skin and they're just instantly bigger.
Weird.
And now the tarantula is big, and I was like, woo! Oh, he's a little scarier than he was when he was a little tiny spiderling, and we don't actually know what sex it is. So I'm saying he, but the name is Anansi, and it could be a boy or girl. We don't know. Male, female, I don't know. We won't know until it's adult, and then there's different ways we can tell based on its...
And then maybe she can breed them and sell them.
Maybe, but probably not.
Do
I
you
don't know how that
spade a
works.
tarantula?
No. I don't know how breeding tarantulas would work, but they are fascinating, and it's just really interesting to watch it grown and then to figure out, is it big enough? Do we need to go and size up its terrarium? Because they want a small space, but you also want to make sure it has enough room without feeling overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. But while they're spiderlings, they like to hide because they're so vulnerable to predators.
Yeah.
So
it's a neat instinct.
Yes. And so it's so fascinating. But we now have a fairly decently sized tarantula, which is quite terrifying.
Well, I know with hermit crabs, it's the same thing. When they get big, they drop their shell.
Right.
And they go get a new one. And so we never knew when that was going to happen. So you're supposed to put in other shells for them. But you need all different sizes because you don't know what one they're going to pick.
Right.
And it stresses them out.
Aww.
And I don't think we ever saw our hermit crabs switch shells because then we left for 2 weeks and forgot to have someone take care of them. And so we came back and they were kaput.
So sad.
I know, but we'd had them like a year.
Right.
But, what can you do? Plan better, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Okay, my scoop is... We just got two of my girls' betta fishes died right when they changed the water. So we've changed the water a ton. Actually, my daughter does all the water changing. I just make sure the rocks don't go down the sink.
Right.
But this time, for some reason, however she did it, because she loves to help my younger one too. However she did it, the betta fish died. But then she also did my son's, and he was fine.
Huh.
I don't know. But... So they were like, we want to get frogs. And those are only like they're cheaper than betta fish. They're only like $5 or $6 each. And they're adorable. Mm-hmm. They're teeny weeny.
Yes.
So like the size of your thumbnail. So we go, we get them. We do some of the things that we're going to talk about later here on this episode. And then we get home and they each have 2 in a bag. And we have the water all ready for them. And we go to put them in the bag. And we put the bag in each of their tanks. Of course, it was really hard because all the water dumped out and then suctioned the frogs inside the bag. So I'm sticking my hands in the bag like, they're gonna die. They're not getting any. I'm trying to get to them, finally get them. Yeah. And it happened both times.
Oh, dear. Oh, no.
So they're in there. Within, 2 minutes, Maisie's down to 1. We have no idea and still have no idea where that other one went. It's nowhere to be found.
Oh my goodness.
Then, about an hour later, I go to look at Ruby's. She's down to 1. And there's one swimming with the betta fish in a separate tank, and they all have lids.
Yeah.
So it literally, in the little air gap where the lid connects to it had jumped out through the gap into the gap of the next tank and got in that water.
That is hilarious.
It was nutso. Couldn't believe it. I was like, wait, Ruby, you're missing your frog, one of your frogs. She's like, no, it was in there. We saw it go out of the bag. And then we saw it in the tank. I'm like, but wait, it's in Micah's tank.
Oh my word.
So we got that back in. Well, now it's been 2 or 3 weeks and they have all died.
Oh.
So
Your good idea with frogs ended up not being
I don't know what happened. We did exactly what she said, got the food she said, did the filter the way she said. We have no idea what happened.
Oh.
I know. And they were adorable. So
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, so that's what I've been waiting to tell you all this time because it's crazy.
I
that
knew you were hinting at something.
Yeah,
and
you
I
knew.
was saying that we had frogs when I was a kid, because my dad had a tropical tank, and it was 25 gallons or so, and we begged him to get frogs, and they would get out where the equipment feeds into the tank, because you have to have the heaters and all of the air filters and all that stuff. So there's little gaps in the back there too, and we could not find it, and it ended up. We found its skeleton behind the TV in the living room because it got out from the kitchen and like hopped all the way before it died.
Aww.
And so then we tried it again and we got something to cover it. So it was definitely a live and learn situation.
We masking taped all around all the openings except for the food opening.
Right.
And the food opening was set apart from the walls. So
you couldn't
we
really get there. Yeah. Wild.
I know. It is wild. All right. So let's get started with learning through pets. So first, I just want to mention pet benefits that we all know, right? Article after article talks about how they reduce anxiety and stress and depression. They offer companionship, and even for some animals, they make you exercise, like dogs and stuff. But there is an article that I linked here called The Power of Pets, and they can even help children with ADHD to focus, and then they can bring calm to children with autism.
Nice.
So that's pretty cool. So what do you do when your kid wants a pet? They want a pet, right? Mm-hmm. So when you start the journey, my experience, and you can say what you did, was there's this whole list of things they should do.
Right.
But I kind of think it would be interesting if before you start, you ask your child to lead the way. Mm-hmm. What do you think you need to do to get this pet? Let them make the list. Let them figure out what books to read, if they even think of that.
Right.
And let them lead the way to pursue what they need to learn for it. And so we have a list of ideas that you can help guide them through it. But the reason I mention that is because I learned that from you, Jessie, when you were talking about getting a pet years ago, or a couple of years ago, how it's a big undertaking, and it shouldn't be the adult doing it. It's the child that needs to learn it, and that's the gift you're giving your child.
Right.
And Dorothy Sayers from Lost Tools of Learning, she's author, says, "For the sole true end of education is simply this, to teach men how to learn for themselves, and whatever instruction fails to do this is effort spent in vain." And it's like, yeah, I want my kids to learn for themselves, know how to learn, right? Okay, so they bring you their list, and maybe there's some gaps. So now you can guide them, right? Exactly. So what's one of the first things you have said to Sophia when she was deciding between like a rat and a tarantula?
Well, the big one in our home was what level of care does it need, and is that practical for our lifestyle? Because that was our biggest factor. You have the high level of care, like dogs. They need daily care, multiple times per day. They need to be outside. They need to be walked. They can't be left for long periods of time. That's high level of care. And then what's low level of care? What animals can you take care of once weekly or whatever? And so that. She had her idea of pets. And so we just said, you need to be able to discern what level of care it needs. And then we can talk about it and go from there. Because we know what we don't want.
Yeah.
And what do you think is realistic? And then trying to talk through with her the reality of can you really be responsible without being reminded to take care of a pet?
Right.
If you want me to go a little further, I would say with the rats, when she was interested in pet rats, I gave her some research. I printed from the local, I forget what they're called, ratteries? Not ratteries, but they have local breeders, and they have a special name like that. And we were looking into it. And then I had her do a mock trial of daily care. I said, if you can do these chores without prompting every day, then you will be displaying to me that you might be capable of taking care of your pet. And I'm happy to be here to support it. But you have to show me that you at least can put in the effort without any reward.
Right. Yeah, because, you think of a spiderling. The big reward would be the shedding.
Right.
but otherwise it's not going to interact with you. Same with the hermit crabs. They could care less about you.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. So the first step that she would need to do is research.
Exactly.
And so without the research, you don't know what you're getting into.
Nope.
And it is funny that that's not something I even thought of when we got our cats.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? So learning to research. So step one, research. Learning to research uses a variety of resources and helps with important development of critical thinking skills and prepares your child for developing credible research papers in their future. It also equips your child for defending their beliefs and they can form an argument. So if they really want something, you're like, no, that's too hard to take care of. If they've done their research, they can say, well, no, listen to this.
Right.
You can actually go 3 days without feeding them if you just get them a feeder or, whatever it is. So what's cool is you can teach them researching skills by helping them research something they care about versus some prompt from some workbook or from unit study that you're putting on them, right?
Right.
So the fact that they have a utility to why they're doing the research to fit with their passion is a big gift.
Yes.
So researching, so there's a couple things I want to say about research. Researching can take many forms. It can be interviews, past or current pet owners, pet store clerks, family members who will be impacted by the animal. So you might want to they might want to interview grandma who lives in the home. Maybe she's allergic.
Right. Yeah, we went to a reptile rescue to speak to an expert on tarantulas who actually cares for them and rescues them. So she's seen a lot of different situations, and we asked for her advice, and that was really helpful for Sophie.
Yeah.
So that was helpful for picking that.
Yeah, and we there's not all pet stores are created equal. Like PetSmart and Petco are great. They have a large variety, and sometimes they know stuff about animals. But if you go to the smaller ones, we talked with a clerk when we were getting our bunnies, who had bunnies like throughout her life.
Oh, nice.
So she was able to talk to us about it. There's articles, magazine, websites. I know my niece who raises bunnies and other animals. She has a website, or a blog actually, but a website that talks about how to care for the animals that she sells and the different types and things like that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Books. You have a book.
I do. The Tarantula Keeper's Guide. My husband ended up picking this out for our daughter when she was interested, and he said, here, read this. Tell me what you learned. And that was kind of, again, just another test to see if she would be motivated to do it, or if that was too difficult, then I'm not sure that you're able to take care of this pet. You know, if it's a barrier for you, then we're not there. So she read it cover to cover.
So cool.
And she still references it often. So it's one that we own and keep in the house.
And it's like a textbook. It's not big pictures. It's small print, and
there's a few nice big pictures, but showing different
But it's
breeds.
a legitimate informational text.
Yeah, and it covers almost everything you need to know about tarantulas.
Even injuries.
Yep.
And you can go to the library too. There might be, you don't know what kind of books to get yet, but if you're at the library and there's a whole section
For sure.
on an ant farm or something, then you can really learn about it. Classes. So Ruby's done vet camp for a day, and so learned about, suturing on a banana and dog CPR. Who knew you could do dog CPR? Outschool.com. Before we got our bunnies, my kids took 2 classes about rabbit care on outschool.com. Farm school. And then you could spend a day with a pet owner. So I learned about that through my niece, because they spent a week. We stayed with them, and they cleaned out the bunny cages. They learned about all of that. And so I felt we were more equipped than most any animal.
Yeah.
Other than, the bunnies, they took care of for a whole week.
Right.
And it was like 24 rabbits. So they really had a good idea of what they were getting into. And then YouTube videos. We watched a ton of those. Okay, so those are different ways to do your research. And then you can discuss with your child about sources. What is a credible source of information? if they go to a website ran by a 13-year-old, they might want to check it against someone who's raised animals for a while.
Exactly. Vet your sources for sure.
Yeah. And how many sources should you explore? How many types should you explore? Do you remember in college when we would do papers, they'd be like, okay, you have to have at least 6 sources and they have to be from 2 different places. They can't all be from, the microfiche.
Right. How old are you?
So, and then how do you know the information is true or current? So UCLA had some helpful tools and questions that you can ask. I linked it here, and it asks about how current is the article, what are the biases of
For sure.
the author, and things like that. So again, critical thinking skills are developing through this. And then topics to research. So we have a checklist linked here. I'll name some of these things, like you mentioned, like your lifestyle. How does it fit your lifestyle? Habitat, nutrition, litter, lifespan and life cycle, initial and monthly costs. You got to research all that. Mental health care. What causes stress and fatigue? Do they bite a lot? Sleep habits, exercise, type of play that they need, ways to connect to your pet, where to get those pets. Is it Humane Society, pet store, private residences, breeders? Where's the best place to get this type of animal? Also, is there a vet nearby you can take them to? And then, and how often is a vet visit needed for this type of animal? And then like your at-home vet solutions, right? What are some things that you need to learn about injury, like in this
interventions? Book? Yeah. What do you need to know about the pet's common ailments that don't, we're not going to take the tarantula to a vet. So what do we need to know about the tarantula to intervene if necessary? And apparently they can get stuck in their skin when they're shedding.
Oh, how sad.
So I had no idea she knew this, but because she'd read the book and retained the information and cares about her pet, she knows to keep an eye when it sheds, because sometimes their legs get stuck and you have to actually
peel it off. Like with tweezers or
I don't even know. I didn't ask because it's like, good to know.
Yeah. I love it when the kids become the experts.
Right.
And then how to care for the pet when you're out of town. I mentioned the hermit crabs. And who do you have to take care of it? We, fortunately have a friend up the street, and then your parents are just a little, 10 minutes away, and you're not far. And I know for me, I love taking care of other people's pets, as inconvenient as it can be, because then it teaches me about the animal and what it would be like to have that animal. It also, if my kids are involved, teaches them, oh, is this a pet I would want to have? Okay, second, so that's all research. Look at the wealth of information they're learning about research and how to do research for something they really want.
For sure.
Okay, number 2 is budget. It's knowing the costs. So that's part of the research. You get the initial costs. What are the reoccurring monthly costs? How long do you expect to have this animal? Is this a 10-year commitment? Are you prepared for those costs for 10 years? Or is it just 6 months? No big deal, right?
Right.
What are the vet costs? What are the supplies for the interventions at home that you might need? Or like bottle feeding. Now you're going to have to buy bottles and things like that. Unused supplies. Do you have anything in your home that's unused that can be cleaned and reused? And do you need to have set aside some emergency funds? Is this
what
animal...
if your dog needs surgery?
Yeah.
Do you have $2,000 for that on hand?
Yeah. And some species are more likely to get tumors than other species. So are you picking a species that might need surgery in 4 years? Okay, then you have raising the fund. So that's another neat responsibility building exercise for the kids.
Yes.
They can map out how they're going to raise the money, whether it's chores, a job if they're 16, donations, entrepreneur activities, having a garage sale, asking it for their birthday.
Yes.
And then negotiating with us or with other friends who maybe they'll pass the pet around if it's a small little cage, And then they need to learn about how to get deals. So they can look on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, offer up, buy nothing. And then friends of friends might have stuff. And then going to local garage sales. So my niece has gotten aquariums and heating lamps and even tissue boxes that she turned on its side and repurposed as like a house for a hamster.
Perfect.
Yeah. Number 3, step 3, plan ahead. So your child learns to plan ahead. of course, they'll need to work with you on determining where the habitat will go and what's off limits to the pet and where the food will be bought and stored and the costs that go with that too. We had to buy bins to put the hay in, or the straw, or whatever it's called, Timothy hay.
Yeah.
We had to buy bins for that. So we have bunnies, a cat, and we had fish and frogs. And we used to have hermit crabs.
Yeah.
And
you have a hamster.
Oh, and we have a hamster. All that, I don't take care of any of them. So that's why I had to figure out. But we had to find space for that. So yes, the hamster is in this room with us, and I can smell the pee on a regular basis. And so I light candles, and then I say, can you clean this out? So-and-so's coming over.
Right.
And so you have to find space. You have to find bins to hold the stuff. Where will the waste go? Do you have a good disposal system? And then how often do you need to clean the cages and stuff? Because that all is something you need to plan ahead. Make sure you can clean it before you go on a trip or whatever. And then introductions. So how did you introduce the spiderling to your house? Like, did it not... Do they require like little interaction when they first come? They probably don't even know.
You don't interact with it at all.
Yeah.
So it had to ride in its little tiny container. It almost looked like a hummus container. And so it rode, in her lap the whole drive home. And he probably hid nonstop for the first 2 weeks we had it, which is normal.
Yeah.
So we put it in a room. She knew it needed to have a room that wasn't full of loud noises or lights constantly going on and off. That's disturbing to them. So So when we brought it in, we picked the quietest room in the house, my office.
Yeah, because you never get to go in there.
I'm never in there.
Yeah.
And we just know to be careful in there. And then that's the side of the house that my husband works on. So that's usually the quiet side. No one's banging drums and playing piano and that kind of thing. So we knew to do that, but there wasn't really an introducing it to its habitat.
Yeah.
The way that you get fish acclimated by setting it in the water, so nothing like that for us. But
I know for our hamster, the pet store clerk had said, make sure you have the hamster in a room where she can hear your voices all the time.
Oh, interesting.
Because then she'll feel comfortable with you.
Right.
But they'll become more wild the less they hear your voices and feel you in their presence.
Fascinating.
So it's like, oh, perfect. In our fun room on top of our dryer, we're
Lots
in
of
here
noise.
all the time. Yeah. So, and then also you need to learn as part of the introductions of how to have them interact with your friends. So we know that the hamster will bite, so we warn.
Right.
We know that the bunnies will scratch if they get picked up, so we warn the children.
Right.
And then that's up to them and their mom if they want to take those chances.
For sure.
Okay, and then sharing responsibility. Make sure you delegate. They need to plan how they're going to delegate specific tasks. So if you're sharing a pet with 3 siblings, who's doing what? So for our bunnies, one of my children handle the morning care and one of my children handle the evening care. And then when I say it's time to clean out their cage, they put on their masks and their gloves and they get the trash bag and they clean them out together.
Perfect.
Yeah. And one of them is always the one hosing everything down. She must like that.
She likes that job
better. Okay. So you have research, you have learning to budget, you have learning to plan ahead, and now you're going to get the pet and you have growing their responsibility and maturity.
Yeah.
So of course we all know this. It requires work ethic and discipline. They learn natural consequences for not caring or knowing enough about their animal. It puts others' needs above their own, so it teaches selflessness, especially if they don't have a younger sibling. Like if they're the youngest, a pet is a great thing for them to learn to be selfless because they always get tended to. People are always told to make sure you include them.
What?
Yeah,
we don't baby the youngest.
I know, but they don't have to do that, right? And so this is a great way to help them learn those skills that their older siblings naturally learn by having younger siblings. It develops skills and character for caring for a younger sibling later, if a baby did come along.
Right.
And future children when they parent. And then it brings mortality into view. And I've heard numerous times people saying that they weren't sure about getting a pet because they weren't sure if their child could handle the death of a pet. And it's a very common concern. And my husband and I were talking about this. We're like, but would you want their first experience of death to be a grandparent? Or would you want to work that muscle of grieving and understanding death through a pet that doesn't mean as much to them?
Right.
Possibly. It doesn't mean as much to
yeah.
him. So Ben Sass in The Vanishing American Adult, he says, death is the hardest question. And in an age that gives short shrift to the transmission of wisdom from old to young, it is not surprising that death is the single most obvious fact of life from which we constantly insulate our kids. We have, to our detriment, created a cult of denial about our own mortality. Life needs to be lived and prioritized with the understanding that it is limited. An awareness of one's mortality makes life richer because the important can be emphasized and the trivial marginalized. And he said, we didn't have this problem previously in, centuries past when kids were hunting.
Right.
Death was ever present. They were watching their parents die or their mom die of childbirth.
Right.
They were watching their grandparents die. They're all living together. They're seeing death all the time.
Yes.
And now we've insulated our kids from that. And so it is a trauma when something dies because they're so insulated from it. So I just thought that was a great mention.
We didn't say this specifically, but I would say another great benefit is the ongoing learning. Like we said this, but for instance, the tarantula, we have to go get crickets.
Oh, yes.
Because they don't stay alive. So unless you want to learn to breed crickets, which no, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm good. So we weekly go to the reptile store, and it's a whole adventure for us, or sometimes it's a quick trip and just my daughter and I go on the way to dance class. And we'll run in real fast and no big deal. But other times, it's a whole adventure. My son gets to go. He names some of the reptiles in the store. We only spend 10, 15 minutes there at most, but he loves it. And so the whole process of that is really great. She has the practice of going to the counter, asking for what she wants, and paying for it every week. Good. And then we alternate. Sometimes we pay the $1 for the crickets, and sometimes she pays the $1, but it's $1 a week.
Yeah,
to
I love
supply
that.
The tarantula.
I remember seeing your stories of the chameleon and the eyes moving around. Yeah.
Yeah, so we found that they now have an adult chameleon in there, but we love the little tiny guys. They're hilarious, and they walk around with their 2 fingers.
Yeah, I mean, just
so
going
funny.
to a pet store it's so fun. Right. We always check in on the dogs when we go pick up, if we go to Petco or PetSmart to pick up some quick food for the animals, and it's so fun to see them getting their hair cut.
Yeah.
We'll go look at the aquariums. I mean, the wall of aquariums is like a work of art.
Yeah. It's so cool. The tropical fish are so beautiful.
Yeah. I love it. All right. So, so the ongoing learning while having a pet. So there's so much you can learn. And then here's some enrichment ideas for read alouds. We've linked them here, but read Where the Red Fern Grows out loud. Read Bunnicula or What Pet Should I Get by Dr. Seuss. They go to the pet store and they're like, I want this one. No, I want this one. I want this one. My friend has a book called Doggos. Is that how you say it? Doggos? And it's dog breeds from A to Z. Yeah. And it's her watercolor, and they're beautiful. Yes. And she has a little fun poem for each one that's specific to their breed. And we linked more here for you, like some Beatrix Potter and more Dr. Seuss and things. And then some documentaries or docu-series, Winged Migration. Your husband has a bunch that we're linking here as well. And some TV shows like Sea Rescue. Yeah.
Wildcrats is a favorite in my house.
It is, definitely. Yeah. So that's it. There's so much that goes into having pets. And I love that you introduced me to that just a couple years ago. Oh, wow, this could be a real learning experience prior to getting the pet and the responsibility that it builds.
Yeah, my daughter did an entire research project on rats. And then we ended up not getting them because she didn't end up sticking to the show us that you can do chores without asking. Like, this is the list of what we would expect for you to do. Here's what you ask about. Are there dishes to be done? See what chores you can help with. If you do that without us reminding you for a few weeks, it seems like you could be responsible. Yeah. And that was a barrier for her at that moment in time. And so then she said, never mind.
Yeah. I don't like this kind of responsibility. I can see I'm not ready for it. So check out our show notes. We have so many other docu-series and documentaries and books linked there. That will be really fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so now it's time for the Coop Q A,
where we answer your question. Mandy, what's the question?
The question is, what would make a great first pet?
Ooh, that's a good one. I have to say my initial response has always been a pet rat. And I know not everybody likes the rat. It's usually the tail that gets to everybody. I understand. However, as far as pets that you want to be able to hold and interact with, they are highly intelligent. They are pretty non-aggressive.
Yeah.
So it's very rare to get bitten by a
Really?
rat. Very rare. They don't bite the way hamsters and mice do, or guinea pigs even.
Wow.
And I know this from personal experience as well. I grew up having pet rats, but the research will tell you the same thing. And you can train them. So they're really fun. You get a lot back from them. Their lifespan is relatively short, which can be good and bad. Good in the sense that it's not forever.
Not a big commitment.
It's not a huge, long commitment. They do need pretty regular care, and they do want a lot of interaction. So they are a high investment type of pet. But they check a lot of boxes for little kids. They're easy to handle, and they are kind and nice pets. But I would say I've learned now that more of the tarantula, some of the lizards, they are pretty low care as well. You just need the crickets or the mealworms or whatever you're doing. But high reward, they're just fun to observe and watch, but pretty low maintenance. So they make a good first.
They probably
pet
don't need
in
to
that
be
way.
handled. Like I know the hamster. I'm like, have you handled your hamster today? Because she's gonna not want to be handled if she goes a few days without being held.
Yeah. So the reptiles, some can be. Some people have bearded dragons and they have them on their shoulders and interact with them all the time. And then other people, they let them be in their terrariums or their whatever enclosures they create for them. And so I have come to find that I'm not as opposed to reptiles as pets because I feel like they're low maintenance. But again, I think that would depend on the research you do on the varieties.
And the live. So for the tarantula, do you give it a live cricket or is it? Yeah. So I think it would be really fun to have an animal where you see them hunt for their prey, right?
We have watched it and it is interesting. It's very exciting because at first the tarantula avoided its food for a while. It definitely took a long time to get acclimated, and so we didn't get the reward of seeing the cricket being eaten. It didn't want to do it in front of us or whatever.
That's so funny.
And so eventually we'd come back and the cricket was just gone.
That's amazing.
And my daughter knew if the cricket's there after a day or two, we need to get it out because then if the spiderling isn't eating it, it might be shedding, and the cricket can mess up its shedding process and hurt the tarantula. So there's all this stuff that I've learned. Yeah, but it has been fascinating because the last few feeds, we watch the tarantula go right after it, and it will eat it immediately.
That's amazing.
So I don't know if the tarantula is more comfortable with us too.
I want to be there for a feeding sometime. That'd be really fun with the kids. Yeah. And kids want nature. They do. They're seeking
fascinated by it.
And this is a great time to do that, especially if you're of the Charlotte Mason philosophy and things like that. Like just really coming into contact, whether it's even getting the caterpillars, ordering the caterpillars online and getting your butterfly, testing it out with that. Because that's not a big commitment at all.
No.
And we started off with that years ago. I mean, before we had cats. So I would say, since I don't know a lot about pets and I can't really pick one for sure, because like I said, we've tried all these different ones and they've all had their pros and cons.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would say get the pet that you're excited about and your kid is excited about.
Yeah.
The one that you're both excited about, then you don't resent the care when you do have to help. When I was first I was the one cleaning the cages first for the bunnies. But it was smelly and gross, but at the same time, it was like, oh, look they're watching me do it. And they're so cute. So I didn't mind it. And then when I was sick, that's when I had to have the kids start doing it. And then they did it. And I'm like, oh, I'm done.
Yeah.
But it was neat for a moment because when you care for something, just like parents, when you care for the child, that's what bonds you to the pet. So if you get a pet and you don't have your child care for it, they're not going to bond to it as much. And that animal probably won't bond to them as much.
Right.
And so if it's something you can both be excited about, it'll feel good for your family to have.
Yeah.
And care for. So check out our show notes and this checklist. We have little boxes for your child to go through. They can find, websites like National Geographic, and they can work their way down the pet research to make sure they've learned all the things that they need to know to get their pet.
Perfect.
That's it.
thanks for listening. We love your support. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, leave a rating and review to let us know how we're doing, and share our podcast with your friends who need a little community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling.